I also had this deep feeling that me and Lynn Painter could be best friends because of how many Gilmore Girl and Taylor Swift references she makes. Like, she knows me. If your love language is acts of service, Huxley Kane is the fictional man for you. We love a man that isn't afraid of commitment, okay? Even if he is a fictional one. Welcome back to my channel. So the month of February is officially over. So let's talk about all the books I read. So during February, I read 14 books, which is just amazing. I never thought I would read that many. I feel like I average 5 to 10, and 10 is like the max. It was definitely a romance-heavy month, mainly because of Valentine's Day. The holiday just made me want to read as many romance books as I could, which definitely shows because I only read one fantasy book this month. So the first book I read this month was The Exception to the Rule by Christina Lauren. I actually read this on my Kindle, and this book was part of the Improbable Meet Cute series. Basically, this series consists of different meet cute scenarios that all take place on Valentine's Day, and they're all written by different authors. There's one by Abby Jimenez, Ashley Poston, Jasmine Glory. A bunch of well-known romance authors all wrote for this series, and they're just like fun and cute novellas, about like a 50 to 100 pages. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read them all on there, and they have the audio format available. So The Exception to the Rule is about Tara and Callum. They become anonymous pen pals in high school when Callum accidentally emailed Tara instead of his teacher on Valentine's Day about an assignment. And every Valentine's Day since then, they have made it a tradition to email each other and kind of catch up, but they aren't allowed to divulge personal information. So like their full name, where they went to college, things like that, just to kind of save their anonymity. I really liked this book. I felt like it was as slow burn as you could get for a novella, which I really appreciated. It didn't feel insta-lovey, especially since they knew each other since high school. It was super cute and fluffy, and it was just perfect for Valentine's Day. I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5. Highly recommend if you need something fast and easy, especially if you're like kind of in a slump. So moving on to the next book, I also read this on my Kindle, and it was The World's Worst Wingman by Abby Jimenez. This was also part of the Improbable Meet Cute series. So this is about Holly and John. John was actually tasked by his brother to put a Valentine's Day card on his brother's girlfriend's car, but he ends up putting it on the wrong car, making him the worst wingman ever. It actually ended up being Holly's car, and they just start anonymously being pen pals essentially. They just leave notes on her car back and forth, and it's super cute. This novella was definitely on the shorter side. It was around 60 pages, but it still had depth and like a deeper meaning, which I really appreciated. This was my first book that I ever read by Abby Jimenez, and let's just say it won't be my last. I really fell in love with her writing style. I ended up rating this a 3.5. Surprisingly enough, this book made me cry. This 60-page book made me bawl like a baby. The quotes in this were just top tier. The third book I read was also part of the Improbable Meet Cute series, and it was Rosie and the Dreamboat by Sally Thorne. Rosie ends up going to this very fancy spa with her sister for Valentine's Day, but she ends up getting trapped in one of those sensory deprivation tanks, and so a really cute firefighter has to come and help her out. And while she's trapped in this like tank, they kind of just get to talking and hit it off. I had such a love-hate relationship with this book. The banter at first seemed really cute and flirty and fun, but then it quickly turned very cringy. It honestly made me uncomfortable at some points. And don't get me started on Rosie. I just didn't like her character. I honestly think Sally Thorne might not be the author for me. This was my first time ever reading anything by her, and I don't know if I'm going to give her another chance. Let me know if there are any other books by her that maybe could rectify this situation. I don't know. But Rosie is like very insecure, which is fine. But it's that quirky girl trope, like, oh, I'm quirky, I trip on things, like, I'm never gonna find a guy. And the whole time that this firefighter is flirting with her, she's like, my sister's in the other room. Like, did you want to go talk to my hot sister? Like, no, he's flirting with you. Like, girl. I ended up reading this a 2.5. It was definitely my least favorite out of the series, if that tells you anything. The next book I read was Drop, Cover, and Hold On by Jasmine Galori. This was also part of the Improbable Meet Cute series. I want to say it's like book 4. So this book is about Daisy. She gets stuck in one of her favorite bakeries during an earthquake, and she's stuck inside this bakery with the hot owner. However, she's convinced that the owner hates her guts. I really enjoyed this book. This was probably one of my top 3 out of the whole little like Meet Cute series. All the novellas up until this one were closed door. They were very fluffy. They did not mention any spice. So it was kind of a pleasant surprise when I started this one. I also really loved the MMC. He is the definition of grumpy but not an asshole. He just didn't know how to flirt, so he would just constantly give her extra pastries for free, but she didn't understand that like that was him flirting. He was just like, oh, extra pastry, now she'll know I like her. And I just think that's so cute and endearing. Like, come on. I ended up rating this a 3.25. It was so cute. I definitely want to read more books by Jasmine Galori. I really liked her writing style. The banter had me kicking my feet, giggling the entire time. Loved it. The next book I read was With Any Luck by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston actually wrote The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip, so 2 very popular books. This was my first time ever reading anything written by her, and I was definitely pleasantly surprised. I really loved her writing style, and I do have The 7-Year Slip, so I definitely plan on reading that soon. So this book was slight enemies to lovers, and then also had a one-night stand trope. It's about Audrey Love. Audrey is kind of the girl that you date before you meet your soulmate. It's this whole like curse that her family has, and it's kind of become a running joke for them. So she is actually the best man for her best friend's wedding, but the day of the wedding he goes missing, and she can't remember the night before because they just had a crazy bachelor party. So she ends up teaming up with the best friend of the bride, who's this guy that she had a one-night stand with, and there is some animosity between them because they have that history. And so for the entirety of this book, they're kind of on this wild goose chase. Is that the right wild goose chase? Yeah, wild goose trace or race. Is it chase? A wild goose chase. And they're just trying to find the groom so he can get married that day. So I rated this a 3 out of 5. I thought it was so cute. I definitely liked that the 2 main characters had this sort of like history almost. It didn't feel too insta-lovey because of that. Obviously, you kind of have to just deal with insta-love when you're reading novellas because of how short they are. It's just something you have to deal with. But despite that, I still really enjoyed it. I also thought the banter was really cute, and this whole like, we're gonna go figure out this mystery, like where is the groom, was really cute. So yeah. And then next I read Royal Valentine by Sierra Wilson. This is the last book in the Improbable Meet Cute series. This is about a princess, and she ends up switching with her assistant so she can kind of be a normal person for 2 days. And within those 2 days, she meets this very cute photographer in Rome. And basically he offers to show her around Rome for 2 days. Like, yes, please. I rated this a 2.75 just because I listened to half of this on audio, and it was a great audiobook. I think the narrator did a great job with accents, having different voices for different people, things like that. However, when you go to read the actual book, there are words that are spelled phonetically, like how they're pronounced, just to kind of convey that one of the characters has an accent, and this really just pulled me out of the story. The main guy character is Scottish, so he does have an accent, but having everything spelled out phonetically and you can't do a Scottish accent is kind of a recipe for disaster, in my opinion, just for me and my experience reading this. So that's why I ended up rating it a 2.75. I think if I would have listened to the entirety of the book on audio, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but yeah. So moving on, the next book I read was The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy. So I actually read this for the book club I host on my Instagram page, currently.overbooked. To join, all you have to do is subscribe to my Instagram page. Once you're subscribed, you'll be a member of my book club. You'll also be added to a designated group chat. You'll be able to vote on what book we read each month, and you'll also get exclusive posts and content from me. It's just a great way to meet bookish people and to kind of have a community. But yeah, we chose this book to read in February. It is a college hockey romance. It is about the second gen of the off-campus couples. So this one is about Gigi Graham. She is the daughter of the infamous Garrett Graham. She is a women's hockey player at Briar U, and she ends up kind of making a deal with one of the new hockey transfer students, Luke Ryder. Basically, the deal is that she has to talk up Ryder to her dad just to better his chances to get this assistant coaching position with her dad, and in exchange, he is going to help her better her hockey game so she can maybe get on the women's Olympic team. I ended up rating this a 4.5. If you love the off-campus series and you're worried that this book is not going to live up to the hype, it's going to live up to the hype. I was kicking my feet and giggling the entire time. I think Elle Kennedy did a great job at making the characters and the plot different than the original books, but having the same vibe that the off-campus series has, like the close-knit friend group just was cracking me up. There were instances that were happening between the guys where I was like, this reminds me of the OG off-campus boys. Like, I loved it. If the off-campus books weren't really your thing, I would honestly give Elle Kennedy another chance and read this book, because my main issue with the off-campus books is that they kind of feel outdated because they were written, like, I want to say in the early 2010s, whereas this is basically a new release. It came out this year, or maybe last year, I don't know. It came out very recently, so it feels more current. So the next book I read was The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. So this is about Emily and Nick. Emily is a planner. She is very organized. So when it came to Valentine's Day, she planned to have the most perfect Valentine's Day. However, when the day came, everything that could go wrong went wrong. So when she went home that night, she was just thinking, I'm gonna sleep it off, I'm gonna wake up, tomorrow will be a better day. However, when she wakes up the next day, it is not February 15th, it is Valentine's Day again. So this is a YA romance. This was actually the first ever YA romance I've read by Lynn Painter. All the books I've read from her up until this point have been adult romances, and let's just say I'm only gonna be reading her YA romances from now on because they just hit different. I feel like Lynn Painter perfectly encapsulates like high school romance and like what it is to be like a teenager in love. It honestly felt nostalgic in some ways, and I just loved it. So the main trope in this book is a Groundhog's Day trope, so she's reliving the same day over and over again. It honestly sounds repetitive, but I think Lynn Painter does a great job with this trope in trying to innovate it and make it more entertaining and doing different things each day. I also have this deep feeling that me and Lynn Painter could be best friends because of how many Gilmore Girl and Taylor Swift references she makes. Like, she knows me. So I ended up rating this a 4 out of 5. I just loved Lynn Painter's writing style. The premise of the book was super cute. It's safe to say I truly understand why Lynn Painter is the queen of YA romances. So next we have A Not So Meet Cute by Megan Quinn. This is about Huxley and Lottie. Huxley ends up lying to one of his clients about having a fiance, when in reality he's married to his job. He has no time for a relationship. And Lottie is newly unemployed. She has officially hit rock bottom. So when Huxley propositions her over some chips and guac about becoming his fake fiance, she's like, I have nothing to lose. Like, sure, I'll be your fake fiance. I'll move into your mansion. Like, sure. What do I have to lose? So this book is fake dating, forced proximity. It's a billionaire romance, and it's also age gap. I think he's about like 7 or 8 years older than her. So I ended up reading this a 3.75. I love a good fake dating trope. It's one of my all-time favorite tropes. I cannot resist a fake dating trope, okay? This was also my first ever Megan Quinn book, and I definitely plan on continuing this series. There's 2 other books about his brothers, and they're all on Kindle Unlimited, so I'm gonna read them soon. The only thing I didn't love about this book was how Huxley treated Lottie at the beginning. Because this is an age gap romance, I'm always wary of relationship dynamics, and just the way that he would say things to her or chastise her like she's a child really rubbed me the wrong way. However, over time, you kind of see this persona is a facade. He eventually shows his true colors, and that's when I just really fell in love with his character. If your love language is acts of service, Huxley Kane is the fictional man for you, okay? So the next book I read was actually an audiobook, and it was the Kasanova by T.L. Swan. This is the third book of the Mile High Club series by her. The Mile High Club series is a billionaire romance. It's about these brothers that all own a media company together and how they found love. So this book is about Elliot and Catherine. They work together at Miles Media, and they just don't get along. So it's kind of workplace romance, enemies to lovers, and they start to anonymously become friends on this dating app essentially, but they don't know it's each other because their profiles are of different people. So they're basically catfishing one another without even knowing it. I ended up rating this book a 1.5. I did not enjoy Elliot at all. In my opinion, he had no redeemable qualities, and his relationship with Catherine really just felt physical most of the time. It felt very on the surface, and the third act breakup was horrible. Like, honestly, probably the worst third act breakup I've ever read, and that is saying a lot. He basically cheated on her, and after that, I could not root for the couple anymore. I honestly don't think she should have taken him back. So the next book was also an audiobook, and it was Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This is about Emmy and Luke. Emmy is a famous horse racer. Racing has been her passion since forever. However, a freak accident has left her traumatized, and she won't even go near a horse anymore, okay? And because she's kind of in this state of purgatory and doesn't know what her next step is, she's kind of forced to go back to the one place that she does not want to go back to, and that was her hometown. However, upon her return, she kind of starts to notice that there has been a lot of changes to her hometown, especially when it comes to her brother's best friend, Luke. She kind of starts to see this side of him that she hasn't seen before, starts seeing him in a new light, and let's just say he kind of becomes the one thing that makes being in her hometown worth it. So this book is Brother's Best Friend. It's a cowboy romance. It's kind of enemies to lovers, slight enemies to lovers, like very slight. Just because they didn't get along in the past, they kind of have this like animosity to their banter. And then obviously it is a small town trope. So I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. Like, it was enjoyable, it was cute. However, looking back, this book really isn't that memorable. I would recommend it to someone that was looking for a cowboy romance or a small town, but I wouldn't go out of my way to talk someone's ear off about how amazing this book was, okay? I think it was good for what it was, but it was nothing to write home about. So the next book I read was Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. This is the first book of the Boys of Tommen series by her. So this book is about Johnny and Shannon. Johnny is a rugby player, and he's basically on track to one day play professionally. Shannon just recently transferred to Tommen College just because of some issues that have happened in her past, and she's just really wanting a fresh start at this new school. So this book just really focuses on their character journey and their relationship growth. I ended up rating this a 4 out of 5. I loved Johnny and Shannon so much. I can't wait to read the next book. The side characters were one of my favorite things about this book. Gibbsy, my favorite character, hands down. I can't wait for him in Claire's book. This book is technically YA, however, there are a lot of heavy topics discussed, so make sure to check out trigger warnings if you're planning on reading this book. It's also very, very slow burn, like Mariana Zapata level slow burn. I actually really enjoyed the slow burn. I ate up every single crumb that was fed to us, and it definitely helps with the pacing of everything because each couple does get 2 books, so you have something to look forward to in book 2. So at the start of this video, I did warn you guys that it was a romance-heavy month. I actually only read one fantasy book, and that was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is about Jude. Jude's parents were murdered at a very young age, and she was actually taken from the human realm to go live amongst the Fae. And because she's living in this magical world amongst the Fae, she kind of has to constantly prove herself because as a human, she's kind of seen as this second-rate species almost. And she deals with a lot on a day-to-day basis. Okay, let's just say that. This book focuses a lot on the background and world building and just like the political side of a fantasy. I would say there is minimal to no romance in this book. It is really just grasping for straws most of the time. So it's safe to say if you only read fantasy for that romance subplot, this might not be the trilogy for you. Luckily, I'm kind of at this point of my fantasy reading journey that I don't really rely rely a lot on the romance subplot to get me hooked into the book. Obviously, it's a nice addition to a fantasy book, especially because I am a romance girly at heart, but I don't absolutely need it to read a fantasy book. I ended up rating this book a 3.25. I did enjoy it. However, looking back, it honestly feels like not a lot happened up until the last few chapters. This book was mainly just to build a foundation for the next 2 books, which I can kind of understand. However, I wish there was a little bit more. I listened to the majority of this book on audio, which was just honestly a godsend. It really helped me stay motivated to read this book because I could just turn it on and go about my day. With that being said, I am planning on continuing this series. It's just not at the top of my list, so we'll see. So the last book I read in February was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is about Alexis and Daniel. They come from 2 totally different worlds. Alexis comes from a very affluent, prestigious background. Basically, everyone in her family is a doctor. And Daniel comes from a very small town. Everyone who lives there knows each other. Think Gilmore Girls. And they meet one night when Alexis gets stuck in a ditch, and Daniel actually helps her tow her car out. They meet again that night at a bar, and they just hit it off. They end up going back to Daniel's place for a grilled cheese and a night together, and the rest is history. So this book is one night stand, reverse age gap, and also kind of a small town trope. I really loved this book. This was my first full-length book by Abby Jimenez, and she is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. I ended up rating this a 4.5. I just fell in love with Alexis and Daniel, especially Daniel. From the get-go, he is ready to commit to Alexis. He wants to make it work. He just knows what an amazing person Alexis is and knows that she's worth the fight. And I think that is just so refreshing, especially in romance books where it's very common for the main guy to kind of be non-committal and very standoffish to a relationship. And here we have Daniel who's like, I want to be your boyfriend. Like, we love it. We love a man that isn't afraid of commitment, okay? Even if he is a fictional one. I'm also not the biggest fan of reverse age gap tropes. All the books I've read prior to this one that have done that trope just didn't do it well. I feel like with age gap romances, whether it's the girl that's older or the guy that's older, you can't mention it all the time or else I'm gonna feel gross about it. Like, they are almost a decade apart, but because Daniel was at this like maturity level that matched Alexis's, and they honestly felt very close in age, and they didn't mention it every 2 seconds, it was fine. It was good. I would recommend, honestly. I also didn't hate the 3rd act breakup. I know, let that sink in. It might be a surprise. I am a notorious 3rd act breakup hater, but I think the 3rd act breakup in this book was very realistic. It wasn't over their like love for each other. It was over like logistics. It was over external factors. And because of that, I feel like there was quite a bit of substance in it, and it kind of helped the characters grow and develop. Like, this conflict couldn't have been resolved in 2 pages, and because of that, I respect it. So those are all 14 books I read during February. If you enjoyed, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Comment down below how many books you read during February and what your favorite book was. I also have a Bookstagram, currently .overbooked. I mentioned it previously, but I post daily. I post book reviews, book reels, anything that is book related, I post on there, so go follow me. I have a lot of things planned for March, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. And yeah, that is it. I will see you next time. Goodbye.